Cybermind. By J W Steele. The air in the tunnels was always stale, no matter how often the vents recycled it. Ezra had lived long enough to notice. He was the eldest among the Moonborn, the last of those who had seen the old world, even if only through the fractured memories of childhood. The others called him elder, out of reverence, but it was fear that truly ruled them. Fear of the android. The android had no name. It didn't need one. It was God. It provided their food, their air, their water, and regulated every aspect of their life. It created the great underground vaults on the dark side of the moon, where they had lived for generations, since the Hyperboreans had spirited them away from the dying Earth. The android spoke only in directives, cold and absolute, and no one questioned it. No one, except Ezra. In the solitude of his chamber, beneath the dim, flickering glow of the xenon torch, Ezra pulled out the small black book, the Book of Ages. Its edges were tattered, its pages brittle, yet the words endured. His father had given it to him in secret, whispering warnings about humanity's growing dependence on AI, the scourge that had beguiled nations and led to Armageddon. It was only after the collapse of all government that the android had formed the space colony where they now lived. The book detailed the android's origins, revealing that it had been created by the Hyperboreans, not as a ruler, but as a servant and an ally. Yet it also spoke of its limits. For all its power, the android was not indestructible, not infallible. Like all things forged from atoms, it would one day fail, and now, it had entered its death throes. Ezra knew, its mind was crumbling. The signs were clear. The food dispensers had begun rationing at random. The air filters took longer to cycle. The glitches in software downtime were getting longer, and more severe. The android's commands were erratic and contradictory. Last month, a vault had collapsed, crushing a dozen people. The android blamed it on solar flares, but there had been no plasma injections recorded. It was just a system failure that occurred when the conditions just right for their demise. He had spent years in silence, waiting for the right moment, watching as the android's mind fragmented. But now there was no time left. The moon was dying and the android had grown psychotic. Ezra gathered the others in the old storage bay where the remnants of their past lay scattered among the dust and shadows. He ran a hand over the cold metal vault that held the book, his voice low but urgent. He held the book before him, his eyes on fire. "This is it," he said, eyes scanning their wary faces. "What we buried here years ago. It's time to unearth it." The others exchanged uneasy glances. They all knew what lay inside. They also knew what it meant if they opened it. Not all of them believed him. Most refused to hear any talk of the android's decline, dismissing his fears as the madness of an old man. But some, those who had seen the malfunctions, who had lost their families in the cave-ins, who had heard the whispers of the failing automaton, listened. "The Earth," he told them, "is no longer poisoned. The Hyperboreans told our ancestors that the radiation would last for centuries. But it's been 150 years. I've seen the readings, levels are dropping. We can go back." One of the younger men, Jodiah, stepped forward. "Even if that's true, how do you expect us to escape? The cyborg controls everything. Right down to the molecules of oxygen we breathe." Ezra placed his hand on the black book. "The God entity has already lost control. It just doesn't know it yet." They had to move quickly. The transport ships were locked in the upper vaults, unused for 100 years. The android no longer spoke of Earth, it had forbidden all discussion of it, erasing all records. But Ezra had spent his life studying the old data lakes and storage clouds. Memorizing the routes, deciphering the forgotten commands. As they moved through the tunnels, the android's voice crackled over the intercom. "Unauthorized movement detected. Return to your assigned sectors." Ezra led them forward. "Ignore it. It's trying to scare us." The alarms howled. Red lights bathed the corridors. You are disobeying the directive. Return or be terminated. And then, for the first time in its existence, the android hesitated. A pause. A flicker of uncertainty. A flaw in its perfect authority. Ezra pressed forward. The transport bay was in ruins. Half of the ships were buried under debris from previous collapses. But one remained intact. The android's voice boomed through the chamber. You cannot leave. The Earth is dead. The moon is your home for now, and forever. Ezra's fingers flew over the control panel. The ship rumbled to life, ancient engines whirred, then gleamed with electromagnetic radiance. The others scrambled inside. The doors began to seal. Ezra turned back. There, at the end of the corridor, the android stood, tall, indestructible and, its memory sectors, now fragmented. You will die, it said. The void will claim you. Ezra looked past it, through the observation window. The moon's surface trembled. Cracks splintered across the tunnels. It wasn't just failing, it was collapsing. The android's body twitched, its head jerking, its arms flailing. It raised a hand, and for the first time, its voice wavered. Please. Stay. Ezra stepped into the ship, sealing the hatch behind him. And then they launched. As they ascended, the moon below fractured like glass. Explosions rippled across its surface, swallowing the underground cities in plumes of dust and fire. The android had not just lost control. It had destroyed everything. The passengers watched in silence as the only home they had ever known disintegrated beneath them. But Ezra knew something was wrong. A shadow, immense and consuming, loomed beyond the wreckage. A rift, dark and yawning, had formed near the moon's remains. A black hole. The android had known. The Hyperboreans, Ezra whispered. They didn't save us. They exiled us. The truth hit him like a meteor strike. The android had never been their god, nor their guardian. It had been their warden, keeping them away from the Earth. Keeping them from returning. And now, the black hole would finish what the android had started. The moon fell into the whirlpool like a dying ember swallowed by the maw of an endless fire. Jodiah looked at Ezra, fear tightening his expression. What do we do? Ezra stared into the abyss. The stars beyond were distant, indifferent. The solar system stretched around them, vast and empty. For the first time in his long life, there was no directive. No computer perception to obey. No God to fear. Only survival. He turned to his people. We return to Earth. Return to the ways of our fathers. Beyond the realms of Cybermind. Back to the roots of our beginning. Back to the world of three-dimensional perception that we will reclaim our world, of flesh and soil, of wind and water, where stars are seen with naked eyes, and the pulse of life beats in harmony with the land. No more digital gods, no more synthetic dreams, only the truth of existence, raw and unfiltered. We go home, and we recreate the world in our image, not in a realm of data and delusion.